Welcome to the upstreamlife.com. I'm your founder and editor, Vishal Krishna. Like I said, I love driving. I spend most of my time in cars, and I've been driving over the last 20 years. And I think if you calculate that, a sum total of half of my life is in a car. So you need digital experiences in a car, you need security, you need data protection, all that. Talking to me about all this is Satish. And Satish is the MD of Elektrobit. Elektrobit is a tech company, but what is Elektrobit according to you, Satish?
So deep down, we are a startup that doesn't want to grow beyond a startup, but we are a German headquartered automotive electronic software company which provides solutions, products and services in this space.
And to be safe, you protect our data.
Absolutely.
So you have to check out the podcast if you're an engineer or if you're a CEO who loves cars. Believe me, you like this. We talk about chips, we talk about security, we talk about the future of transformation through cars. So my sponsors in this are Finvest.guru. They're a startup that help you learn finance. You may be a guitarist, you can be a guy who builds cars too, but you still need to know finances. Sell them, sell your music and sell the car, of course. So enjoy this podcast with Elektrobit. Thank you. Satish, thank you for being on the upstreamlife.com. You know, I've been a fan of automotive all my life, you know, kids with cars to writing about automotive. But automotive is so much about software now, user experience, much more. I want you to tell me about yourself. In a sense, how did you enter the automotive industry and what inspired you?
Okay. Firstly, thanks for the opportunity. Coming to the automotive industry was a pure coincidence. So I did my engineering in instrumentation and I was working in a non-automotive industry. And when I started in my second organization, by pure random coincidence, I was put in the automotive department. It so happened that I was the second employee after the department head. And life just took its course from there.
Right out of college?
So, no, I've spent the first couple of years working in the oil and gas industry and then landed up in a IT services company which was starting in the automotive services space. So that's how I, let's say, complete random coincidence. But since 2000 January, I've only been doing automotive, and I think for about 20 odd years only with German automotive organizations.
How did that transition happen? Did you transform yourself? Do you know much about cars? Because 20 years ago, cars were just, you could see that things were changing in that industry.
At that time, pulling up the window meant you do this.
Yes.
Yeah?
You remember that, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
All the millennials that are watching this, we did do this to get our windows down.
Exactly.
It was interesting.
Yeah. From there, it went to press the button continuously till the windows roll down, to now a one touch up and one touch down. No, I didn't know anything about cars then, to be honest. And I came in here, and the first, I think a couple of years, all I did was to understand how do cars, bikes, trucks, commercial vehicles work? Because I came from a family which did not even own a motorbike or a car.
But so it was complete.
No, I did my control systems, instrumentation.
Oh, you did instrumentation, that would help, right? That's the foundation.
It helped a lot. So at least the sensing and then the actuation, acting and sensing, all of that background helped me quite a bit.
So which car did you have to break down to understand, break its pieces and understand?
The first, I do. So it was actually a Maruti Suzuki Esteem. So it was one of the first cars that I broke down just to understand how do the mechanics work. What happens when you press the horn? What happens when you turn the steering wheel? It was a very interesting experience then.
Yeah, that sets the context for Elektrobit, right? We will get into what Elektrobit is. So the car, let's talk about the car itself. How many controllers in that Esteem at that time?
So none.
None, right?
None. So
but
this is 23 years ago.
Then, though.
No, at least the one that I had didn't. So that was 23 years ago. There were some models which I think had one or two. Yeah.
That's it?
That's it. Yeah.
So how many lines of code would it be?
I guess a few hundreds, if not more.
Unlike millions today, right?
Millions, yes. So we are talking about hundreds of millions today.
Hundreds of millions. So yes. Hundreds of millions.
Exactly.
That's been the rapid pace of change. And that's what we want to cover in this podcast. And the center of that is your company, Elektrobit. Of course, Finnish, German, American. You want to tell us a little bit about Elektrobit?
So Elektrobit is today a German headquartered automotive part software, part services, part product organization. We are global in nature, so we have businesses running practically from every continent except I think South America. So we are based out of Germany, of course. Originally was a Finnish-owned organization, and then in 2015, Continental, the German automotive giant, acquired us. However, we are an independently running subsidiary of Continental, so we run our own businesses, and we are predominantly based in Germany, North America, and of course Asia in terms of Japan, Korea, and China as our sales business. That's
and
exactly.
sales.
This is sales, and then in terms of R&D, we do it in Germany, Finland, Austria, Romania, and India. And India today happens to be one of the second largest, very soon to be the largest R&D center in. For the family.
That's the talent pool.
That's the talent pool.
We'll talk about that also. You said it very nicely that hundreds of lines to millions of lines, multi-million. So there, Elektrobit plays in three different roles. That's digital, that's products and services.
Yes.
But that's also the life cycle of the car and how it's evolved in a way. So let's start with the core, which also is about a story of standardization, which is something called the Autosar. A lot of the automotive enthusiasts will know what an Autosar is. But let's say that our audience watching this are engineers who understand UI, UX, but they want to understand everyone talks software today, but they don't understand the middleware today, which is commoditized. So Autosar is just that. You want to talk about the evolution of the Autosar and the car together.
Yes.
And then we'll move into different pieces of what Elektrobit is solving.
Yeah. I'll just set the context.
Yes, please.
So Elektrobit is about 35 plus years in existence.
Although it works like a startup.
And it works like a startup. Autosar is 20 years old. If you take every single vehicle that runs Elektrobit software and line it up one behind the other, we will circle the equator roughly 65 times. Yeah? So that's the amount of software experience and let's say the software execution activities that we have done. Autosar originally was conceptualized with the idea of cooperating on standards but competing on implementation. That was their tagline. And it was basically the middleware equivalent. So I don't care whether I have a CAN interface, a FlexRay interface, a LIN interface. Loosely put, we are talking about differences between a USB, HDMI, things like that. Yeah. So it doesn't matter what communication protocol I have below. My application should be able to send and receive communication through those lines. And the middleware was created with the idea of completely abstracting developers from having to worry about what's below. I remember when I started my career, we had to think about writing compilers ourselves, linkers ourselves, assembly files ourselves. Today, other than these being known from, let's say, in a theory basis, most, if I can call university students, don't understand what it is to write a linker because everything is available as a no-code, no-code. It's completely, and you don't have to write it anymore. But about 25 years ago, things were different. You had to write your own linker. So you needed to know where you're placing what piece of software. These were all completely abstracted with the advent of Autosar because the idea was that the most difficult part of an embedded controller, embedded software, was abstracted from application writing. And people who wrote applications only have to concentrate on the algorithms, on the physics and the science of it, whereas what happens below, irrespective of what my hardware is, I did not have to worry about it. So this took out a big portion of the stress associated with writing software for embedded applications. So that's how Autosar came into being.
So these are management of ECUs, different
ECUs. These are management. So every ECU, ECU is electronic control unit, which is basically like a microcontroller or a chip. Each of them has a certain memory, each of them has a certain software function to be written. For example, an ABS has its own microcontroller, a tire pressure monitoring system has its own, an airbag has its own. So all of these are microcontroller applications which we call ECUs. On top of it, software has to be written. And the idea was that the middleware of all these chips can be standardized so that you don't have a failure because of the middleware. Middleware in some form is a commodity, should not be the cause of a failure, and that's the reason why Autosar came into existence to make sure that a piece of software becomes standardized, and instead of worrying about what is very standard, the car manufacturers worry about what is their differentiating aspect. So in the Elektrobit world, we call it non-differentiating and differentiating. Non-differentiating, in our world, non-differentiating software is basically the Windows operating system, right? So we said, let's take that non-differentiating part inside the car, the middleware, anything about the hardware till the application, and make it standard so that it works reliably, it works as fast as it can out of the box, and as financially viable as it can be.
And
so that's
OEMs, how. And the OEMs can then work on, the marketing pieces of it, on making user experience better.
They will write the application.
Also. You also said physics.
Exactly.
Why?
Yeah. So, for example, an airbag deployment for manufacturer A might be different from a manufacturer B, other than, of course, the standardized certifications that are necessary.
To the ECU, right?
It connects to the ECU. So the software on top. Let's take the example of autonomous driving, which is now bringing us to today's world. So there are certain algorithms that you write. For example, data that you gather from a camera and a radar, the fusing of it together, the sensor fusion, what you do with it, how do you actuate different parts of the vehicle, that's an algorithm. And that is basically what we call also an application. So in the cockpit side, that's a user experience, but everything else in the vehicle which needs to work, I mean, from the time that I'm let's say pressing the brake or turning the steering wheel, today it's all what we call drive by wire.
Yes.
Everything is electrical signals which comes to a controller, and that controller decides, oh, am I steering to the left, steering to the right? Am I braking it hard? What do I need to do? So these are now the applications that you see that happens behind the scenes.
So this is where the OEM can differentiate them.
The OEM differentiates themselves.
Drive-by-wire can be a different experience, and the modules for them will be different.
Exactly.
And the middleware is the same.
The middleware remains the same. So the idea is that the OEM focuses on differentiating software, and with differentiating software is the differentiating experience of what happens when you sit inside the vehicle, either on the steering wheel or beside it.
See, this is why I like automotive, right? It's just not mechanical. It's a combination of electronics, electrical, software, right? And if you combine the three, there's physics, chemistry, all three.
Exactly.
Five now combined. It's a beautiful place to operate.
Absolutely.
And that's where I want to go to Elektrobit, right? Your evolution started with Autosar services to products. You want to talk products. We'll also go into the digital life experiences. What are products for Elektrobit?
So we started with Autosar and we started building products around it. So today there are two aspects of Autosar. One we call real time. Real time means everything must happen right now. So I get a message right now, I need to do something right now. So sensing and actuation right now. Then you have the other, this is called classic Autosar. The other part is called adaptive, which is more on high performance compute. So high performance compute need not be real time. So you have a different system architecture. So one way to look at it is, for example, you have a high performance computing happening somewhere either on the cloud or some other part of the car, what we call a domain or a zonal setup. And based on the compute, you get information back to a real time. So let me take an example. So I'm driving the car and I see an object in front of me. Now I am still in control of the vehicle, but then there is a camera and a radar which senses that there is an object. There is high performance computing happening at a central system to say, now what if Satish is not aware enough and does not brake? Should I brake on his behalf? Yeah. So these are all systems that you can find in cars even in India today. Yeah? So this is the high performance computing that is happening, and then it gives a message to the actuating part of my real time setup to say, okay, if Satish is still not braking till this point in time, you brake the car on your own. Yeah. So this is an example of both real time and high performance. So what is called classic and adaptive. Elektrobit has a product in both areas. So we started off with products here. However, since Autosar is not a global standard yet, we also provide solutions around it. So what we call product related services. So you take a middleware and you put it for, let's say, an OEM in US in the way they want, and an OEM in Japan in the way they want, and likewise for China, and now also for India. So that's one aspect of our portfolio.
And when you say, just for the audience, right, when you say for the OEM it will be a different middleware in the US and Japan, it will be again to say that we'll give you that layer, you figure out what to do with it, but we will help you do that.
Exactly.
So that means, again, they have to take the consumer in mind.
So actually, it is about the cost of the vehicle.
Yes, that's true.
So the cost of the vehicle.
That is the main thing you mentioned
exactly.
earlier, yes.
So that will decide whether I will have a high-end hardware chip in my car or a slightly medium end. So if I have a slightly medium end, the way the chip, the memory size, the speed at which it will speak to you, the performance capabilities will be different from a high-end chip.
So it'll be the high performance versus classic again.
Exactly. So then you decide based on, so if I have a chip with this memory set, this speed, processing power, the OEM will decide, okay, my certain application will deploy in maybe a couple of milliseconds or microseconds later than a high-end controller. So these are decisions that the manufacturer takes based on what is the cost with which they operate. So that's one aspect.
So you build basis that.
So the middleware then has to be, so we have to make sure that it qualifies for the hardware that the car manufacturer decides to have, which is a measure of the economics. Cost.
So the data itself is abstracted. We'll get into consumer data in a bit for those of them. So there are 8-9 ECUs, millions of lines of code.
Yeah.
So each of them is putting in data or talking to each other. Is there a central chip? Is that where the data comes in now?
So as of today, so 8-9 is for a lower end car. So at the higher end car, we are talking about 120 to 150 different controllers. So the range varies. Today, the network architecture is in such a way that all of these, let's say if you're talking about 60-70 controllers, all of them are talking to each other in different parts.
So it's abstracted and then orchestrated?
In some form, yes. So it depends upon the vehicle network architecture. So for example, you have what is called the body gateway architecture. So there's a gateway. Behind that gateway, you have a lot of body controlling applications. So lights, tires, things like that. Then you have so that gateway module speaks to another gateway module which hides the powertrain. So if I have a diesel injector or an ICE or maybe an EV, so there are a set of ECUs that take care of the engine management system. Then there is an infotainment gateway above which you have your cockpit. So do I have a Bluetooth? Do I have an Apple, Android Auto, Apple CarPlay, things like that. So these are so the architecture abstracts the ECU. So that's the first part. But these are what we call network architecture of the past. Today, what is happening is, so when everybody is speaking to everybody, obviously the pace is going to be slow. Now we are moving to a point where we say zonal or domain controller architectures, where you have one central chip, which is a very high performance compute, but you will have typically 3 or 4 of them. So infotainment will have its own domain controlling. You will have a safety, its own domain controlling. So safety will be airbags, braking, things like that. Then you will have a body, which is lights and sunroof and all of that. So, and of course the powertrain. So you will have these 4 zones at least. So I said body, safety, infotainment, and it can be autonomous driving or driver assistance. So it's a known domain. So think about it as a kingdom, and inside the kingdom,
I was just thinking ancient Japan, whereas the emperor was just a figurehead.
Exactly.
And then you have daimyos who are running the country.
It is exactly the same. So each of these kingdoms operate mostly on their own, and then data is exchanged to the remaining 3 domains, and then you decide based on this data exchange if my vehicle, my engine module needs to speak to my driver assistance module. So that's how it is. And the beauty of this architecture is you reduce a lot of network interfaces. So your communication becomes that much faster. And most importantly, your wiring harnesses weight comes down.
Does the central chip have any bearing at all? Does it lead them, direct them?
So
you're talking about something which is you call this giving permissions that yes, you're supposed to do this guidance. Does that happen?
To some extent, yes. So think about it as you have a set of controlling which is sensing what's happening. So I am driving autonomously and I see a dog on the road. I am sensing that. Then there is the central chip which decides, okay, the dog is not on the middle of the road. The dog is, let's say, on the opposite side of the road. Therefore, I don't have to brake. That intelligence decision is then computed on the central chip, and then you give out to an actuation controller to say, hey, you have to brake because the dog is in the middle of the road, or you don't have to brake. This is where the reason why you have a domain is because you have a lot of high performance computing that happens. So if you go back to the earlier use cases, we never had an autonomous driving. We never had even driver assistance. So there was no need. Everything was driver based. So if I met with an accident, it was always the driver was the reason why there was an accident. Today that changes. So it depends upon, you have use cases where, I can give you my own example. My car brakes on its own. So it has a collision mitigation assist. It brakes on its own. And there are times when I'm sitting inside the car and then my daughter looks at me and says, why did you brake so hard? And I'm like, I didn't brake, the car braked on its own. So I have the possibility to say the car did something. As a joke now.
But sociology, technology,
exactly.
That's another.
That's a completely different aspect. But coming back
to
the
products.
So that's one product. Then we do something on, we do something for cybersecurity. So we run our own, so we have a subsidiary called Argus based out of Tel Aviv in Israel. So they take care of cybersecurity. And there is another product that Elektrobit provides, which is cybersecurity, or what we call the hardware security module on the chip itself. So cybersecurity can be broken down into two parts. So today's vehicle is open to the internet. Anything that has an open interface by default is then prone to attacks. So the first is to figure out how to stop the attack over the air, and the second is at a hardware level. So it is like saying I have an antivirus running on my hardware level which says, oh, somebody is trying to reprogram the entire chip, don't do it. So we have what is called the hardware security module. Then we have another product which talks about networking with communication by software, which means today a lot of networking happens via hardware. So we have something where you have the possibility to network via software or switching by software. Then we move into the services space, which is at this point in time what we call digital life experience. Broadly put, our argument is that end consumers today want to have the same digital experience that you have at home on your phone, which is translated into the car without having to do anything. So that's the other aspect of our portfolio. Of course, we also support electrification and driver assistance as part of our solutions offering.
Okay, that's wonderfully, the context is so wonderfully set. The product layer, you spoke security, which is also a function of the data, right?
Yeah.
Because we are connected to different Wi-Fis or VLAN as they call it in Germany.
Correct, yeah.
Right, because cars allow that, and there's also anyway a SIM card.
SIM card inside the car.
Right, it could be your chosen telecom operator.
Correct, yeah.
So where is that heading? Because you said computing can happen domain or public cloud.
Correct.
That the OEM decides.
Correct.
And therefore the IT services companies manage that, and obviously you will orchestrate that for them. Right, and then now the aim is, where does security fit in? Where is data going in terms of a consortium? I've always said a consortium is necessary. What are your thoughts on these public clouds, private clouds, hybrid clouds, and where is that consortium going? Or will it be saying, the OEM will say, it's just me, I will own the data? Or you also said government can,
own the data.
When we were having coffee, you said government can take over too. And it's so many beautiful things in that aspect. For me, I'm glad you said security is important as a consumer. As long as the data doesn't get stolen, it's encrypted, it doesn't go to some party sitting out of some some place where there are data pirates or something. That's, it's fine by me, regardless who owns it.
True. So let me try to break it down. So first is Autosar as a standard, for which, by the way, we are celebrating 20 years this year. So it was of course helping us with the what is called the real-time part, classic Autosar, then the high performance computing adaptive. Now the standard is trying to extend itself to what happens on the cloud aspect.
Yes.
Yeah? So we still have vehicles mostly doing most of the computing in the car. But with the concept of edge computing, you have the possibility that certain aspects is done on a private cloud. Today, we are not yet talking about a public cloud. But then we have to keep in mind who are the cloud providers.
Yeah.
A car manufacturer
is outside.
Exactly.
It's not in the premise.
It's not on the OEM. So the fascinating part is you have some software, or you have a system provided by a tier 1 sitting in a car manufacturer, let's say X, who is outsourcing or hosting the cloud data on a tech giant, let's say Y. Yeah. And then the services of the software inside that, let's say tier 1, is done by company A somewhere located in India. So you have these 4 players at least. Then you have the telecom player. Yeah, telecom player basically gives the 4G, 5G connectivity, in the future 6G, between the car and the cloud.
Yeah, and 6G they say is going to be satellite and not. Yeah, that's another interesting aspect.
Exactly. So now you have many players where the data is, where it is possible that the data is available. So of course the 2 largest player, or the 3 largest players in my view, is the car manufacturer, then there is the telecom provider, and then there is the cloud hosting company. So between the 3 of them, it isn't clear yet who owns the data. Now you have to look at automotive industry in a slightly different perspective as well. So in certain countries, automotive industry is an extension of the government's, let's call it, reputation to manage the country quite well. In those cases, if the OEM owns the data, there is an assumption that the government also has access to certain part of the data. Now, why should the government step in? Because Let me take a use case. Yeah,
please. That'd be nice for people to listen to. Why? Because usually people are very distrusting of the government for some reason.
Yeah, true.
But in fact, they should protect the data because we're talking sovereignty and all that. Right?
Absolutely. So, and with the GDPR regulations, it becomes, I mean, India also has its own. So, it is necessary to find out actually where is the data located. So, let's take an example. So, I'm driving a car, you have a car. Let's assume that both of us have the same manufacturer, same model for whatever reasons. But my driving style is far more aggressive. That means I have a lot more accidents. You're one of those very disciplined drivers who make sure that you follow all the rules. Therefore, the amount of accidents and the insurance claim for you will be different. Now, ideally what happens is at the end of the year, you go to one of these apps and say, I will pick the cheapest insurance. Those insurers today give you an insurance based on, of course, what you have claimed, without knowing if I have met with an accident and serviced it outside my standard dealership, right? What will happen in the future and should already happen is with the idea of what we call predictive maintenance, because data from the vehicle is already stored somewhere on the cloud. Now, if the insurers or the banking industry has access to that data, it will have an impact on your insurance premium. It will have an impact on the EMI that you will pay the next time you buy a car from the banking industry. Yeah? And in this case, it is very important for the banking industry to have access to this data so that they can know that these are not loans for which there will be a certain amount of payback for
or
them.
Or it can just have somebody like Elektrobit saying, that I know this customer.
Correct.
You know, you don't have to look through all his data. I am verifying him. Something of that
So we are not yet in that space, but you have all these parameters which decide whether a banker or an insurer gives you a certain amount of leeway, or what we call no claim bonus, things like that. Yeah? So this is an important use case for us to keep in mind. Here, data ownership becomes that much more critical. Do I, as the driver of the car and consumer, want my insurer to know? Is it necessary for the OEM to know? Should the OEM own this data, or does it belong to the government? These are some very important questions. These have to be answered not in economic way, but what is best for the society. Unfortunately, there is no answer to this yet. Depending upon which country you are in, either you trust the OEM or the government. So I believe the solution will be different for different regions.
How many years away in India in this case?
We are dangerously already living this use case. So the car that I'm driving already has a lot of data that my manufacturer
but this
has.
Car, probably the data will be abroad, right? At this point in time.
No, it's not yet. It's stored locally. It's sitting. No, it is available on a cloud, which my OEM has a private partnership or collaboration with.
And they help you with the services.
So what kind of map updates need to be provided? What happens when I press an emergency SOS call? All that data is already out today. As an end user, I don't feel comfortable, but I don't have a choice.
Satish, you made these wonderful points of data usage. You said customers should be given the choice to choose. But should there be a choice at all? Or will they care about a choice? Do they have a choice? I'll say the reason I say this is because we've given, when I say them, we've outsourced running a country to a government. So this data, if in the realm of sovereignty, should it be outsourced to them, or do you say in this case it's completely different?
So horses for courses.
Yes.
So it depends upon what country you live in, what's the type, the kind of government that is ruling the people, what car manufacturers are we talking about, what tech companies are hosting your cloud. So there are variety of parameters. App providers,
and
exactly.
Insurance.
Yeah. So today, I mean, if I take a different an analogy, so when I visit a new site, it asks me, should I store cookies or not? And I don't know how many people actually just click OK. I go to each one of them and say, please only store what's most necessary, because I don't want my mail being spammed by all these sites. Yeah? I mean, if there's a site I am on just once, I don't want to receive messages from them every single day, because that's how today's online.
You go to a website and say only this particular day or nothing else.
Exactly. So every site that I go in, when the screen pops up saying, do you want all cookies to be stored, or do you have your own preferences? I spend that additional 30 seconds because I don't want an email, a marketing email or a campaign email from that site the next day on my inbox. I'm very clear on that, because if I skip these 30 seconds.
I get all these emails because I've accepted cookies or whatever.
Yes. And then you have to go and unsubscribe.
I have to say spam or something.
Exactly. And you then run the risk that you have, let's say, an important email that you didn't read because you have 99 other. So I do that because I think, so in the automotive parlance, we call it front loading. Yeah? Front loading means you spend more time while you are designing a system, while you are writing the system specifications, so that you don't have to spend time testing it. Because when you find the problem at a later half, that's usually much more time consuming, much more expensive to fix. So I take this, so I take the effort.
Take it very seriously.
Yeah, you have to, because each of them is data, right? So that's the same inside the car. See, my browsing history, the perspective is very different from my driving history. Why do I want somebody to know that that I was, for example, in a hill station outside Bangalore every second month? Yeah. So these are all matters of, I mean,
family,
this is very, yeah. So if you believe that this is not invasion of privacy, by all means allow the data, but that end choice must be with the consumer. This is my belief. Then comes the concept of data protection, right? So the GDPR equivalent. So India is already having a policy and the data must be stored in India. I would be very uncomfortable, and this is my private view, if the data is hosted in some other country. That's my view. So I'm glad that in this case, the government has also taken that position. But these decisions can only be taken when public and private sit together. And we must understand it is not government and a company, because it's not one company. It's the car manufacturer, it's the tier one, it's the telecom provider, it's the tech startup that provide apps, it's the tech company which hosts. So there are many players. There is not one representation. And then it's my data. Yeah. So I don't know if you know this, but I think 4 or 5 years ago, there was an experiment conducted. So your phone sends out your GPS coordinate even when it is switched off.
Yeah, this I've heard of. Yes.
Yeah. So if this is true, basically I have my phone on me every single day. So my telecom provider knows which block I was in minute by minute, hour by hour. Yeah. So there is already a lot of openness or transparency of the data. Why do I want, for example, I mean, we all are irritated with these calls saying, do you need a personal loan? Do you need this? Yeah. If you have a vehicle and your vehicle insurance is expiring, please note, I mean, you could probably note it from your own experience. 2 months before, you will start getting insurance calls. The moment you've renewed, maybe a week later, you will stop getting those calls. Now, this is my data. I decide where do I go to, right? Wow. Why do I need so many calls? I mean, we keep discussing it at work. You know, you're in an important meeting. Somebody just calling you and saying, why don't you insure your vehicle? Now, take it one step forward. Somebody will say, not insure your vehicle. Satish, your brake pad is going to wear off in 45 days. Come to my service station. So imagine the amount of calls that somebody can make to you. These are the good examples. There can be another example. Let's take, for example, your vehicle is prone to cybersecurity attacks. Somebody knows that my car is going to be wearing off its brake pads at some point in time. Somebody hastens that. So we are talking about just irritating communication all the way to very dangerous outcomes. So this data needs to be figured out. I mean, we need to sit down, have a debate, but this is
a false positives.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. So we need to be very mindful about what happens with this kind of data, which is why I believe the autonomous driving has not yet taken off, because in autonomous driving, you already have this ethical questions. Yeah. So we call it the corner use cases. So let's say the car is driving on its own. You have 4 people on one side of the road and one man, let's say one man on this side of the road. There's no other way. And you have to hit one of them. What should the vehicle decide? How should the vehicle decide? Yeah? Even as a human being, we don't know what to decide. And this is of course with the assumption that the car cannot brake in this scenario. These are all ethical questions. How do you answer them? How does a government decide on laws for machines? These are all things that we really need to sit down and have a debate about. And it's again the industry players. There are many players, not one.
There's lawyers.
Then there is lawyers.
There's lawyers and policymakers.
Exactly. Yeah.
All this business community.
Yeah. And we spoke about just the set of people who manufacture the cars, right? Actually, I keep forgetting the chip manufacturers also have a big say. Yeah?
Because they're the brain.
Then you have the insurers, right? Why should the insurance company pay for an accident that an autonomous driving vehicle had. So there are a lot of ethical questions that needs to be answered, and I believe that as end users, we need to have a more active debate, push our governments to try to bring in regulations so that the private players are somehow in check. But this is a very, very important debate in my mind.
Satish, this is like a brave new world. It's like, in one way, it sounds like a science fiction novel that we're living. It is becoming a reality. Where will this take us in this brave new world? What are the immediate? Because you're reading my mind again. I'm alluding to the next question, which is about digital life experiences. Right? Where is our society heading? We'll talk about Elektrobit's work at digital life experiences, but I want to know, where will society transform itself with so many players? Is it going to be easy? Is it going to be even more complicated and complex? Anyway, the world is so complex as it is, right? Like you said, the people are marketing everything, and there's an assault for your mind space, right? As a leader, you have decided that, okay, this is my focus, and therefore I will keep to that focus, and that's you. A lot of people will be spammed, spammed, or should I say that their mind share will go into managing deletions, right? And then should I take this service or not, right? This fear, these what do you call those notifications that keep coming now? Yeah, it's an ethical question, correct?
It's a very ethical question, and I'll take my experience. Please. So I think about 20 years ago, we had that Mark Wahlberg movie called The Italian Job.
Very good movie.
Very good movie. And there's a scene towards the end of the movie where somebody manipulates the traffic infrastructure, the lights, to allow their cars to pass through, and then makes it red. At that point in time, I was thinking, whoa, I don't know if we will ever get there. We are already there. So it's not just the possibility to have remote traffic management system, but the vehicles can communicate with traffic lights. I mean, in Bangalore also, you see traffic lights being changed so that they can read the high resolution number plates, so that you know where the vehicle is at what point in time. So this is a reality. We are waking up late to the debate. I don't have a view on what should the industry do. I have my private view set very clearly that this is a debate we must have today. We must decide what happens to this kind of, let's say, information being available out in the open, and the end consumer must know who all has access to this kind of information. Some people are okay with their vehicle information on where it was, at what speed did it travel, things like that being out in the open. Others may not be. Imagine you have, let's say, a high profile delegate or a government minister, and you have the possibility that the data is leaked. At what point in time his or her vehicle was there? So the security risks, there are huge consequences which we have not woken up to. To answer the question, I'm actually looking at a lot of these movies to understand.
I can understand why you're trying to paint this picture as well, because you're saying we are living that reality, and we need to get everybody together, and it has to be a community-driven thing.
It
can't be one person taking a decision like the fintech guys wake up and say, I will own this, or the government says, I will own it.
Absolutely. So what we can do, I mean, as Elektrobit, what we are trying to do is for example, we call it penetration testing or intrusion detection. So we penetrate into vehicles and show each of these manufacturers how easy it is to get into your car and, for example, disable the brakes or disable the steering system, to let the automotive industry know that these perils are real. Today, we are just assuming that, I mean, sometimes it takes the first big fatal disaster to change the course of human history. So I hope we don't go there. And then we realize that just as you have an antivirus in your laptops and personal computers, you need to defend not just data but also these risks. So it could be possibly the next, hopefully I'm wrong, but it could be the next way that a war happens. So you don't have to put missiles on countries.
You're absolutely, I mean, that's how the world's evolving with these tools, and I hope we have these. I think India should lead this. We are leading in terms of software. I think we should create a global debate. And Germany has taken a leap in this already. I don't know why Germany more so than anything. It's interesting, right? More vocal on the AI ethical standards. I like this interview because we're not talking, the effect of generative AI and everything. Life is much more deeper. And it's funny how car is central to everything. I think we live so much of our time in a car, and it can also be transport. So we do spend a lot of time in transportation. So what are digital life services for Elektrobit? I mean, it's about the user experience, UI, UX?
It's about vehicle experience.
Okay.
Let's put it that way. So today the infotainment has rapidly. There was an inflection point. It's a couple of decades back. So we moved away from those TFT displays where you press some buttons to an LED, an LCD, then to an LED. And today you have vehicles which have end-to-end, what we call pillar-to-pillar display clusters. And each of them indicate a certain amount of information. This could be about the weather outside, traffic management system, navigations, extension of my phone, possibility to play music. If you're rear seat, then you also can play movies and videos. So the idea for us is to take whatever it is that you experience as fun in your digital life at home, to bring it seamlessly into the car. So it can be a variety of it. You have also vehicles already today providing massage functions in your seat. So all of them lead out to what we call having the same experience that you have at home in your car. Like you rightly said, we spend hours, at least in Bangalore, I spend at least 2 hours in the car every day, right? So you want to have the same experience. If I'm taking a call, can I take it on my inside the vehicle? Can I see the screen on a big monitor instead of seeing it on my small phone? These are all realities of our life today. So,
for example, noise cancellation is one of the things. I can take my meetings while I drive. I don't want to know I'm driving.
Exactly.
Those kind of things.
Exactly.
So you can think. So this team must be really good on your side. They must be thinking various things.
Yes. So we have a lot of creative ideas coming out of the organization to talk about what can we do more. So we recently were discussing about LED displays that are put on top of each other, overlapping. So when you overlap, you lose about inch and a half of information that could have been displayed. So how do I have it that way? So when you talk about pillar to pillar display, then you're talking about a curve. How do you create a curved display? So these are innovations that we bring in, not just at a hardware side, but also what kind of information is not too much information. So we have at least offerings on the entire spectrum, from hardware prototyping, giving you the possibility for checking if that's the right thing at the right place physically, all the way to digital information that is needed for people who are sitting inside the vehicle. Very customized to the driver as opposed to the passenger, and those who are seated at the rear. So each of it is completely different, and you have the possibility to customize. So the customization part is the most critical, because that's the difference between UI and UX. UI is just buttons. User experience is what kind of personalization that I get. So my favorite is, so we always talk about the 4 trends. We talk about CASE or ACEs, depending upon whom you speak to. Connected, autonomous, shared, and electrification. I always want to add the P and call it space. P is the personalization. That's the most important. I sit in, the moment I unlock the car with, these are all features already existing. Unlock the car with my key fob, the car seats change, the steering position changes, and I have the radio that I want, the FM channel that I want. So things like that. So these are all.
And it's just scratching the surface, no?
We are still scratching the surface, and that's where when we extend it to AI or generative AI, the possibilities are immense. But my view is, before we head into that direction, we should be very clear on what is ethical and where do we don't want to touch.
At what stage do you see a owner of a bike move into a car that has all these features? Do you think software will ever be affordable in personalization for a 4 lakh rupee or 5 lakh rupee car?
I think it's a matter of time. So how you design it is the most important part. So if you look at software for a particular model, honestly, you will never be able to pack in so much software. So we have to look at what we call the platform approach. So if you take your mobile, very modular. At the same time, you have to make sure that your software platform is built once, and then you bring in features or remove features based on the model that you sell. So that's the only way to look at it holistically. Some companies, global manufacturers, are wanting to build this in-house. If they have the wherewithal, in brackets, the financial capability, they can try. But I can give you numerous examples where you cannot build this all. You need collaboration in the system. And I'm not saying Elektrobit can solve all its problems, but you need engineering services provider, you need a solutions provider, you need an OEM, you need a tier 1. You need to bring all of these parts of the industry together to make it work.
An EV player in Bangalore is investing in its own chipset.
Yeah.
I mean, this Bosch also announced, for example, its chipset. For example, everybody seems to be announcing chipsets for cars. I think at some point of time, I think Apple and Google also thought about, and Amazon thinks about chips. I mean, it's all experience in the everyday consumer. Why are people thinking chips?
Because so we call it the vertical integration. So vertical integration basically means you own the supply chain as much as possible. You start at the chip because based on the performance capability of the chip, the power of the chip, you decide what software you put on top, what communication protocols can I have, what part of the vehicle will I be controlling, and therefore what features can I provide at the topmost level. And you will find chip manufacturers wanting to be in the vertical integration. So if you get to the autonomous driving space, there are probably 1 or 2 chip manufacturers only that can deliver you that entire the chip which can do autonomous driving and the entire software stack on top. This could lead to a monopoly, and you already see tier 1s competing with chip manufacturers. So there is this fear.
So the OEMs are competing with chip manufacturers?
So the OEMs are at the mercy, this is my view, of the chip manufacturer. So if the chip manufacturer says, sorry, I will not help you, the OEM cannot, you cannot bring out the car.
They're on trying to own the chips.
Exactly.
That's where you guys come and build the services. And
correct. Yeah. So the chip manufacturers, we didn't speak about it a lot, but this is now the next big behemoth which will decide how the future of the industry will be. Yeah. And you have so it's a possibility, a reality that chip manufacturers will put some tier 1 companies out of business.
The brands.
Absolutely. Because as a tier 1, you have this big question. Should I be a systems provider? Should I be a tech player focused more on software? Or should I just be what we call build to print or an engineering manufacturing supplier?
Like
so I only provide
company now, or CPG
yes,
company.
so just a packaging company. So somebody gives me software, somebody gives me intelligence and the chip.
You own the brand.
No, you don't even own the brand. You just put it all together, and so you're just basically assembling. Yeah, just repackaging and distributing. So this is a very transformative time for the automotive industry. I think 20 years hence, very tough question. So you have to ask yourself, what is my identity? What is my future? Where do I want to be? Because the EMS space or build to print space is large volumes but very small margins.
So that's why the CPG companies own the IP of the food.
Correct.
Right? And then, or the shampoo.
Yes.
And they just say, they
get
work with vendors.
Correct.
And that's a brand.
Correct. Yeah.
So that's
because that's the high margin part. For the vendors who are packaging or just taking, let's say, the content and packaging and then distributing it to the retailers.
No wonder the race to the chip.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's why the chip is now, that's where the power lies.
And the chip is with 1 or 2 companies, ARM.
There are, so you have NVIDIA, you have NXP.
NVIDIA High Performance.
Yeah, you have Texas Instruments.
Yes,
but it depends upon what use case. So each of them are known for its own use case. There's Qualcomm.
Just for the younger kids watching this, at the chip layer, where does the conversation start? Is it an ARM core that starts with an ARM core, or is it a TI or an Intel chip, or where does it begin?
To be honest, that really depends upon what domain are you looking at. So if you're looking at
automotive, let's just look at automotive.
No, within automotive also. It's within. So if you're looking at autonomous driving, then
NVIDIA,
you talk about so you have NVIDIA, Qualcomm's. Yeah. If you're looking at, let's say, the body gateway, then you're looking at a TI or an NXP. So it really depends upon. So you start with what do I want to serve the end customer, and then how many cars do I want to sell? And these are on opposite sides of the spectrum, because you want high performance packed into your vehicle, but you also want many vehicles to be sold. So at the end, you decide what makes sense in terms of your business, which is why a lower end vehicle will have a completely different, so you might have the same network architecture, but the implementation with hardware will be different. And what makes it even more fascinating is, we talk about software upgrades, right? But you move to your mobile devices. Typically, I mean, an upper middle class or a middle class Indian changes phones for every 2 to 4, maximum 5 years, right? Can you do that with your car? Can you go back to the Can you go back to the dealership and say,
can you remove the software and put something else or something?
Because the hardware will be that many years older, right? Yes. So now the interesting, and this is where the chip manufacturers come into play. How can you have a chip that lasts 15 years while the software is continuously getting updated? So when we spoke about the first car that I opened up, that car can run even today, 25, 30 years later. Of course, the policy doesn't allow.
Your Elektrobit makes a lot of sense. That means for you, it's business all the way.
Absolutely. So this is what we call software lifecycle management, because the OEM will need to know what software is running in which controller, in which car, and in which part of the world. Because what you download, let's say in a Germany, might just be very different from what you download in India because of data protection. So the automotive world is getting that much more interesting. So, and I'm happy that we are at the right place at the right
opportunity. For me, the reason I kept saying wow a couple of times is simply because one is the political and social transformation.
Correct.
The complete business transformation. That's an overall.
Absolutely.
Overall of the entire automotive industry, which we're used to about 100 years, which is the same.
Correct.
Right? Which is now completely different. Now you're competing with the tech guys.
Yes.
And the tech guys can control you if it's a monopoly.
Correct.
So the brands have an existential crisis of saying, should I think tech? And therefore most of the investments go in there.
Correct.
A fair point. There's so much that we can talk really. Satish, I need to now narrow it down to a few more things. The talent. Your team in India is growing. Where to? You're also part of Continental. Do you want to talk about that relationship quickly? And also you believe in open sourcing a lot of things. Why? Let's talk about these things. Talent, relationship with Continental, and open sourcing.
Yeah. So talent, India is the place to be. So not just because of our the best cost and the best value that we provide, but also the talent availability. So we spoke a lot about various technologies. So we are moving from, of course, embedded all the way to cloud. Yeah? India provides, because of the fact that we have been an IT country at least for the last 30 years. So you get all these skill sets. So that's the reason why talent availability is one of the strong reasons still that companies exist in.
Talent. Very good talent.
Yeah. Very good talent. And that's what we will also leverage. So within Elektrobit, so we've just extended into a co-working space in Cochin, just to make sure that we can also look for talents beyond Bangalore. So for us, that's the intent. Yeah. And with talent, then we can also service Indian customers, because we have a very clear focus on specifically the two-wheeler EV market. We're chasing that market because there is a possibility. From that, I'll jump to open source first and then come to Conti, because in the two-wheeler space, see, the middleware that we spoke about, the Autosar architecture, is prevalent in the four-wheeler space. In the two-wheeler EV space, right now, it's a bit unregulated. So you have a lot of startups popping up. You have safe scooters, you have not so safe scooters, you have very strong designs, you have not so very strong designs, companies which focus on software over-the-air updates, companies which say, I don't know what to do. So you have all the varieties. And we are in that space looking to see how we can bring in our middleware, even if it means going the open source way. So Elektrobit already launched its Linux-based platform on the adaptive part. So we believe in open source to the extent that you can run your safety applications as good as it can be. So we believe in that open source model, and we want to see what we can do to serve the community better, serve the industry better. With Conti, so Conti has allowed us complete independence, so we are very happy with that relationship. So in certain areas we compete with Conti, which can be interesting, and in certain areas we go to a customer and an OEM together, where we say, hey, I will bring in a certain amount of design element or software, and Continental brings in the system experience, because they have been the masters on the system side for the longest time, right, for a century and above. So we bring in. So the best part is when Conti has a potential customer in mind, Elektrobit can come in and talk about the tech prowess that we have. When Elektrobit talks to a customer, we say, hey, we of course will do it one time, but if you want repeatability, go to Continental, because that's where the system experience and the manufacturing. So we've had a symbiotic relationship. We still maintain independent networks. So what we do with our other customers, we don't share with Conti, and likewise, meaning the other way around as well. We've had a good relationship so far. And in India, like I said, we are in some cases also competing healthily.
You know, the conversation that I've had with you, Satish, is I can go on for 2 more hours, because each of these pieces has so much knowledge. Okay, but anyway, we have to cut it short. But I'll again do another podcast with you. Personally, you said you obviously from Bombay. You didn't have a car or a bike those days, and you just and so glad to meet you in a position of managing director. It's like stuff of dreams, right? That's the new India. Where do you see yourself? I mean, with Elektrobit, you're doing where do you see yourself in Unwinding? As a CEO, you have to unwind. As an MD, you have to unwind. How do you unwind?
Dogs. So
You love dogs, right?
I love
them
dogs.
too. Which one?
Yeah. So I used to have a golden retriever.
Oh man,
so
they're amazing.
yeah. So but we lost him a couple of years ago. Now it's more about trying to spend time. Yesterday there was an article by Chetan Bhagat on stray dogs. So I tried to make sure that the dogs are fed and were adopted. That's the first option, of course. But along with a vet of mine, vet friend of mine, we try to see what we can do to help these dogs. Sterilize, feed, get adopted. So these are the three options.
So that keeps you happy.
It keeps me very happy. And of course, I play badminton. So I've got a bunch of very cool friends with whom I play badminton. It's the unwind peak of the week. We play badminton over the weekends and then go out for a cup of coffee.
Switch off business and selling and targets and then managing team and then go badminton and then just say,
so there's one more. I'm also responsible for the global strategy of my organization. So switching off. So I have this process. I call it zone out. If my daughter listens to this, she'll be laughing. So what I do is before going to bed, I have a ritual. I sit with a book or the newspaper, whichever is easily available. The TV is on because I need that noise to switch off from the rest of the world. My phones are switched off. It goes on do not disturb. So my Alexa also tells me it's 9 a.m. So time to wind down or time to go to bed. 9 p.m. So between 9 p.m. and 7 a.m. I try to make sure that all my devices, all my digital connections are switched off. And a book, a newspaper, and then something on the TV which makes no sense at all. And then
I'm completely zoned out. Spend time with daughter and family?
Usually it's after dinner. So if we have the possibility, if she doesn't have enough homework, I don't have calls, so we sit together.
Oh man, homeworks take you away, yeah?
Actually, that's one more zoning out point for me. So if I have to teach her physics or math, then
You like that?
That's I love it. So she has a very different view to it. She thinks that, so she's a bit afraid of sitting down with me.
Why you're strict?
Not strict. So
that's an old Indian word.
Her mother is strict. I am, in fact, on the other side saying, you don't have to work towards concepts are more important. Don't worry about marks. Yeah, so there's this ideology difference between
that's fine. Yeah, that's how it should be, right? I think the mothers are a little more hardcore.
True.
And the concept, and it's nice to have a parent who thinks concepts. It's great, and I wish your daughter all the best. But what are you reading?
At the moment, I'm reading this book from. So actually, we're working with an organization which is helping us with transformation. So he's also my personal coach. His name is Sundara Nagarajan. We call him SN. So his book, and the book says this book is not for Edison. I love that book because it talks about tips to entrepreneurs who are looking to set up startups. So it doesn't tell you the basic things that you already probably get it from your VCs or your friends or your co-founders. But this talks about basic things that you must do right to get it to the next step if you're a tech startup founder.
Do you miss the hustle of Bombay?
Mumbai. Yes, I do. So I travel at least once a quarter. I've got my school friends there. Annually also meet my engineering friends there. I miss Bombay, at least for the public transportation.
That keeps you on your toes.
Completely.
I did that for a few years.
Completely. But the best part now is both Bangalore and Bombay, the traffic issues are the same. Metro construction, if you're sitting in the cab, then you aren't sure if it is Bangalore or Bombay because the metro construction is
therefore we need Elektrobit a lot more because we need the in-car experience also to come by. So thank you.
Thanks.
It's been a pleasure, sir.
Likewise. Thank you so much for the opportunity.